Welcome back. My name is Max, and I'm here to talk to you about what are my priorities for developing a good proam student, whether it's my student or whether it's a student that I teach out of town. So, having to have experience with proam for many years, I realized that one of the first things that I do with a student who's could be experienced or could be brand new, it doesn't matter. First thing is making sure that they're aware of their own personal balance, meaning that they understand posture and they understand where their weight is in terms of being in a good place or in a bad place. That is the first thing, because most students, in my opinion, don't recognize when they are off or when they're on balance. So they may be attached to an instructor through a hand connection or a body connection, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're on their feet. They may also be shaping quite a lot and they're not on their feet. So all of this is noticeable when you're competing. So don't think that just because you're holding on to an instructor, or if you're an instructor and you're holding your student, it doesn't mean that it looks the way it's supposed to. So my first priority would be that to make sure that the gentleman or the lady, whoever is the proam student, is on their feet 100% of the time. It is very difficult to do it 100% of the time, but that is the goal. So even sometimes us as pros, we do not get it 100% of the time, but get to it as close as possible. The next thing, and that's probably the thing that misses the most, in my opinion, is that the student doesn't know their own timing. So they know their steps, they know what goes after what, they know what dance they're doing, they know all those things, except a lot of times the timing. Timing of the step, meaning, is it regular timing? Is it a canter timing? Is it syncopated timing? Then we go deeper into that. What kind of syncopation do we have? Do we have 1, 2, and 3? Or do we have 1 and 2, 3? So for those ladies that have turns in their choreography, you have a few options. You have a basic underarm turn, which is 1, 2, 3. It's very even. Every beat is the same. That typically happens to be the hardest one. The syncopated one, we can have many options. We can have an entry of a whole beat, which is 1 and then syncopating, 2 and 3. That's one option. We can have a syncopation early on, which is 1 and 2, 3. And what I would like to do always with my students is that I like to explain to them that the difference between the two is not just in the numbers and the ands, but if I walk into a turn as a lady on a whole beat, which is, let's say, 1, I have no turn. I have no intention to turn or to spin. I have a whole beat to drive my weight into the left foot in this case. So this will be 1. And then I go on with my syncopation. What we normally see is the ladies are very aware of the fact that they simply have to turn, and that's all they do. They just simply turn and they land, most likely out of time and out of balance. And the teacher doesn't control the beginning and the ending of the turn. They simply catch them if they're lucky at the end. So this is a huge problem that I keep seeing. And ladies, if you have a syncopation right away into the turn, then by all means dance a turn 1 and 2. And again, the 2 is a single whole beat, so you're going to go much more linear. So to give you an example, this would be 1 and 2, 3. So I'd like to show you a little exercise that I do with my own students. Is what I do is I do the turn for them by myself, and I ask them to tell me the timing that I have done silently. So basically I turn, I don't say anything, and they have to tell me the timing that I did. So I'm going to do the same for you. I'm going to do a turn, and you're going to have to figure out what timing I did. So the first turn is, so that timing should have been red. And if you're still thinking about it, that's good, but I'll show you one more time. So if you haven't gotten it yet, the timing for that turn was 1, 2, and 3. Because I didn't turn on the first step, then I spun, and I landed. I'll do another turn from this side. Or from this side, same turn. So if you're reading that correctly, you're reading 1 and 2, 3. How are you doing that? You're doing that because you're seeing me turn on 1 and then go straight on 2 with the same side lead and finally finish 3. Now the reason I do that is because judges do the same thing. They watch the way things rise and fall and the way the body language is, and it tells them a certain timing. So just because you know a certain timing as a student doesn't mean you're actually doing it. So please, if you're an instructor, make sure that your student knows their timing of turn. Usually if it's a lady, if it's a gentleman, there's a little bit different priority. He needs to lead the lady, so he needs to know her timing as well as how to lead it. So that's definitely something I would put my attention to. Another thing that comes to mind for my students or others is the way they carry themselves on the floor, between dances, before dances, and as they walk off. So that's important because you get a good start with good posture. You have a first impression of you by someone who's judging, and you know, if I demonstrated as a gentleman and I would walk out with good posture and I place my lady, I could be an amateur, I could be a pro-am student, but if I am in this posture, then I have a good chance of doing well. I am starting with something, I'm starting in a good place. And visually, the judges also take a look at me and say, okay, this is going to be just fine. So the other option is for somebody to simply walk out in their normal kind of way, place the girl, or when the girl is placed, and you can see that posturally, and you're standing there waiting for the music to start. So at this point, you should have already been different. It doesn't need to be anything extra. You don't need to over-exaggerate, but you need to understand what it's like to have good posture as soon as you walk onto the floor. When you walk off the floor completely and you're on deck area or you're in the dressing room, you can do whatever you wish. But as soon as you're on the boards, it's different immediately. Notice also, it's a small exercise to get this part going well, is I have my students walk on their toes. So they walk on their toes for a couple of seconds. They get a natural feeling of keeping their center up because you're on your toe. That feeling has to stay when you go back to heel, so then I have them walk, and in the middle of it, I ask them to go back to flat foot. But as you can see, the feeling of having a high center is there. So again, if I go on a toe, everybody picks up their center, everyone I know, and then when they go back to heel, their center has to stay up. So what shouldn't happen is after this, they shouldn't drop their center. They should know what it's like to be on a toe, and then simply lower the heel, and even the sound of the feet is different, rather than if I walk normally, there is a sound to my feet. So that tells me immediately that the center is not lifted high enough. Now if I walk, this is not a special effect by dancevision.com. This is my center being in a different place, so you don't really hear my feet. So this is important as well when a lady or a gentleman student walks onto the floor before they dance and between the dances. So when the dance is done and the lady has done a curtsy or the man has bowed with his professional teacher and he walks onto the next spot, there is a feeling of, again, having my center higher until I place the lady for the next dance. So you are there on the floor. As long as you are there, I think it's important that you behave a certain way and have certain posture. Also, another thing I'd like to mention is that this is mostly for the teachers that are watching this, but please be careful with the difficulty of choreography that you give your students. Please believe in the fact that if you go nice and gradual and slow, and you get through your bronze, and you do things correctly, and they get experience, they of course get better and move into silver and gold. I've had a few students myself in my career that have come from a higher level of dancing, such as silver or open gold, and I had to put them into a lower category because I didn't feel that they were executing the things according to that category. So for me, it's important that student gets taken from early stages on, because as children, we the professionals, we were taken in a certain order. We did not become like this overnight, and we didn't get the knowledge overnight. So there's no fast track to this. There's no instant coffee, so to say. You have to go in a certain order. So please do not avoid that, regardless of how much your student wants to dance in a month in a competition and they want to enter an open gold category because they want to do fancy steps. So please stay away from that. They will do fancy steps when they're better at what they do and they're on balance and they can be expressive and so on and so on. It's a much better experience than just surviving the competition. Now, a lot of things I mentioned so far will contribute to having a pro-am student, whether male or female, who's much more organized. We're looking for organization. We're not looking for just come out there smiling, having fun. That's wonderful, and you can still do that. But if we're looking for quality, we need to have organization in how we develop students. Otherwise, it becomes a mess on the floor, and the quality is quite low. So one of the last things I'd like to mention is that the regularity with which students practice has to be there. What I mean by that is, as a student, I expect you to come in to the studio before your lesson starts, or well before, warm up, put on your shoes, stretch, get ready for your lesson, however long that process may take. For some it's a couple hours, for some it's 30 minutes. But it's ahead of the lesson, warm up, remember your choreography or the things you did on the last lesson or coaching, and you're ready to go when the teacher is ready to start with you. Because some of your instructors may be going back to back with other students. They don't have time to warm you up. They don't have time to wait until you're ready, so to say. So please make sure that you're ready before the lesson. This is a huge importance for me as an instructor, that I can see my next student warming up while I'm finishing a lesson with my current student. And the regularity with which you see your instructors is important. And I mean regularity, I don't mean amount. Meaning, you don't have to see your instructor 7 days a week for 3 hours each day. That is up to you and your instructor to discuss. My point is that you do not want to come in once a week and expect a certain result. So the regularity of it may be having every other day, maybe having a little bit, but often is what we're discussing, rather than having a lot at once and then not much at all, or not taking lessons and practicing, and then the week before the competition, you have 48 lessons. So that usually doesn't have a good effect to it. So please develop your students with a certain direction. They are athletes as much as we are athletes. They may not be professional and they're not getting paid for it, but they have to develop just as professionals. I don't think that should be treated differently, and a lot of them are actually as good as some of the professionals. So let's give them respect. Let's make sure that they are developing in a correct way. So this is all I have for you, and these are my priorities for developing good, solid students that can continue to develop themselves, and they're not dependent as much on the professionals themselves. Thank you.